reality? Are you living it?
You are a function of this total galaxy, bounded by the Milky Way, and that furthermore, this galaxy is a function of all other galaxies.
Our reality.
The show that will stretch your consciousness and awaken you to a world of unlimited possibilities. It's time to change the world. It's time for an awakening. It's time for Our Reality. Hosted by your emissary to planet Earth, Violeta Frankovic.
Hey, good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to some. Welcome to Our Reality, where every week we discuss something out of our reality that is amazing. Our today's guest is nonetheless just as amazing and wonderful and courageous, and it's really my privilege to interview her. She's a person that is like a sounding board to my own soul, and through whom I find my own experiences valid. So my guest this Saturday, her name is Penny Bradley, and in her own words, she says, "I was a military laboratories created hybrid, born in 1955. I was kidnapped in 1959 from my bed and taken to Langley for mind fracture and weaponization of my psychic abilities. Part of that was a tour at Montauk in the time tunnel. In 1964, I was taken to Mars through the New York jump gate. I spent 25 years on Mars in school and as a fighter pilot in the war with the native green reptilians and the mantids. In 1990, I was transferred to Darkfleet, where I was a navigator in a freighter for about 25 years. In 2014, I was age regressed, mind wiped, and time traveled back to where I was taken from. I no longer knew my family and had lots of programmed alters. In my lifetime since I was returned, I studied mathematics, computers, and microbiology. I was married and had 3 children, now grown. There have been obvious blockages in my life path. Age regression sickness started in 1981. I was still able to work most of the time until about 2001, when arsenic poisoning floored me. I struggled to regain my health and was working full-time again in 2004. A work injury made me paralyzed from the waist down in 2009. I came back enough that I can walk and take care of myself. I started recovering memories and reintegrating alters in 2013. Welcome, Penny. What an amazing lifetime.
Well, thank you for having me today.
Absolutely. You're very impressive. Your autobiography is very impressive. It seems like you lived several lives at once.
That's how it feels, is that I've lived several life. Well, I experienced them one after the other. So I am in this lifetime, and then I'm taken, and I experience that whole time, and they bring me back, and then I go on to the next part of this life. Although there are times that because I'm actually in 2 places at once, that I will psychically feel what's happening to my altar. So I call that bleed over. Bleed over is an old term from Citizens Band radio. When you had your radio going and you didn't have a good filter on it, your neighbor would hear it on their TV and get mad at you. That was called bleed over.
Yes, truly multidimensional, right? So you hear.
Well, it's the same timeline, it's the same dimension, but you're in 2 places, so you're quantum entangled.
How cool. How cool. And a lot of people don't get to experience that in their lifetime. And so listening to you is amazing. Amazing. I want to ask you, if you don't mind, so when you spent the 25 years on Mars and you were a fighter pilot with the native green reptilians and mantids. What did it look like?
Mars?
Yes.
At surface level, Mars is like a rocky desert, but there is weather. There are seasons. It does rain. Most of it evaporates before it hits the ground, but there are times of the year where there are lakes and rivers. There are trees, especially around the South Pole. There are animals. Most of the animals are either insects or reptiles, but there are some birds and mammals. Because it gets so cold at night, pretty much everything lives underground most of the time. They're in caves or burrows. So there's not a lot on the top of the ground except in the middle of the day. And it gets, I don't know what it is in centigrade. It gets into the 70s Fahrenheit in the middle of the day. So it's comparable to being at 8,000 foot elevation on a summer day.
Okay.
But it gets well below freezing at night every night.
Got you. And now who's in charge of Mars?
There is a treaty between 5 different races. And for the humans that are there, the Earth humans, the Germans are in charge.
Interesting. And what other races are there?
There are a mantid race that's based on ants. There are raptors. There are Mars native humans who have been there for thousands, if not millions of years. They are so much like us that our computers thought they were us. So at some point, we've been connected to each other in the past.
Okay.
And there is a city in the southern hemisphere, it's underground, that has about 10 million tall whites. And there's a very small town near Olympus Mons that has about 500,000 Draco.
Interesting. And do they live in peace, all of them, or is it just
they did until the Germans got there.
How did the Germans get there?
The Germans got there in 1962, and they came through Hannibal ships, and they had a treaty with the Draco, and so that they built their initial site in Olympus Mons, and they called it Eris Prima, and it wasn't really suitable for humans. So the only way to get territory was to attack the people who had it. So they literally started a war to be able to build their homes in areas more suitable to humans. So every square inch of space is already owned by someone else. That's been a big problem with all of the space factions, is they have to either have a contract with the owner, so they're basically subleasing, or they have to take it by warfare.
Gotcha.
And so it's it's created a lot of problems with our neighbors.
Got you. Thank you. And now, do they know about us on Earth and what we're going through? How do they relate to us?
I served with the Germans, and their people are told that there was a cobalt war on Earth and that Earth will be uninhabitable for the next 10,000 years. So they have their population has no idea that we're still here. Some of their people do know this because there's trade. Like Tony Rodriguez talks about that he was on a ship that came to Diego Garcia on a regular basis. But most of the people out there, you talk about Earth and they say, well, Earth's dead. And they deeply believe that.
Just like we believe, or I would say our majority of population believes the same about Mars.
Yes.
That makes sense. And Penny, how did the Germans, so all we know about the Germans, like, common knowledge is there was a war, 1941, they wanted to conquer the world, blah, 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 blah. What is the Germans' connection with Antarctica? And then how did they get to Mars? Like, what is behind that? Do you know?
There had been a space program that started, I've tracked it back to the 1600s. With Edward Kelly and John Dee. And so they've been working on this for a very long time.
So way before 1940.
Yeah, way, way before 1940. In fact, their program in the 1800s was through a group they called NIMSA. And they were in an alliance with the Office of Strategic Services in the United States. At that point, it was under Teddy Roosevelt that America switched from working with the Germans to working with the British. The British had been our enemies up to that point because they wouldn't let us go, and we kept being in wars with them. So Teddy Roosevelt is who changed our alliance from Germany to Britain. So, and I looked at this because historically you look at this and you see all these wars with Britain, and suddenly we're defending Britain in World War I, and it did not make sense. So you have to look backwards from then to find when it was, and it was Teddy Roosevelt is the first place that they talk about a, quote, special relationship between America and Britain. Gotcha. And I've not found it defined, but I know that's when it happened.
Got you. So let's talk about secrets. So obviously this is new information to me, 1600, that's way, before, way, way in the back.
That's way before most people think. Most people think that it started with the Nazis and Hitler, and it did not.
Exactly.
It started way, way before that. And they had been working on things, the aristocracy of Germany was not actually a country until the 1800s. It was a bunch of little places that couldn't get along, kept fighting. So it was these, I think the term is principalities. So they were these tiny little kingdoms that kept fighting, and it was the Prussians who united them in the 1800s. And then everybody else is going, what?
Got you.
So they were several hundred years behind everybody else uniting. And then when they did, it scared their neighbors. They had a problem, though. they didn't have oil, they didn't have coal, and they didn't have space to grow food. So from what they taught me in space was that they were uniting all the German-speaking countries into one with the hopes of finding enough resources for everyone to survive.
Gotcha.
From their point of view, they were not trying to take over the world.
I see.
They were just uniting the German-speaking countries, and they figured everybody else panicked unreasonably.
Gotcha. And what happened with Antarctica? Is it true that they went into Antarctica and it's alive and well over there and there's bases and so on?
That was true in the past.
Mm-hmm.
In the 1930s, there was a ship, the Neuschwabenland was the name of the ship, and they discovered a place where warm water was coming out from under the ice. And they did explorations of that part of the continent. And afterwards, they had other trips there, and they established a base in basically it was a cave under the ice. And they called it the Führer's Wonderland. But when the Führer switched from doing what the aristocracy said to doing what the Jesuits said, the aristocracy tried to kill him.
Gotcha.
And that failed. So they took their space program that they had been working on for 300 years, and they moved it to Antarctica. Because at that point, they knew that the war was going to fail because he wasn't listening to them anymore.
Okay.
And so they knew they were in trouble because they had tried to kill him too. So they left and they took their toys with them. And what was left in Europe was things that didn't work well. So that was what was left that the Allies got. But there was a lot of paperwork because Himmler had a group called Anunnaki, and they were doing research into ancient texts to find information about prior civilizations. Now, some of their ideas were completely insane, and other ideas that they got were actually right on the money. But the biggest problem with the regime was their racism. And they lost that when they came into space.
That's good.
Whenever they had contact with other ET groups, they found out that all humans have more in common than any of us have with any ET.
Yep, absolutely.
And at that point, they kind of grew up a lot because they got out there, they had this deal with the Draco, and it was insane. And they were stuck in a deal that was outrageous, and they were trapped. And they had to find someone else to take over the deal before they could be released from it. So they actually got the CIA to do that. So, you know, people who think that the Germans are doing all this stuff, they don't understand that the Americans are also involved in it.
Yeah.
And it's what has happened out there. Remember, I was taught from the German perspective. So from what they're saying is they went out there to escape the bankers here.
Got you. Now, here's a question, Penny, if you don't mind. So now you've revealed to us something that's even news to me, but I believe you. Since 1600, there was a space program. And, I know we're not going to talk about religion, and we're not, but I do remember some paintings, old Christian paintings, and it shows Jesus, and then it shows aircraft right above it. And I believe it's a valid painting from the Middle Ages. And then it shows all these UFOs, and then, it shows whoever was around him or whatever, back, thousand years ago. And so that sprung into my mind when you said 1600. So I'm like, yes, it's quite possible that they've been pulling wool over our eyes, as a whole humanity for a long, long time. Now,
well, if you look at some of the graphics from Egypt, the old drawings, you'll find grays and other extraterrestrials are through everything. Yes. The beings that have a bull's head, those beings come from the Taurus system. The ones that have a dog's head, like Anubis, those come from Canis Minora. And the ones that they draw as snakes with various numbers of heads in Asia, they come from Cassiopeia. So these are ETs that are openly displayed for thousands of years. This is not, ET involvement with humanity is not a new thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. We always need to remember that. You're right. And now, who's in charge of Earth currently?
There are competing factions in charge of Earth.
Okay. And not all of them human, right?
Not all of them are human. The best information that I have is that humans were created as a slave race. Even the Bible says we were created to serve God, and that the ETs who did this knew they were going to be leaving, so they created a hybrid between Homo sapiens and themselves, and those are the people they left in charge as overseers. And they were originally told to take care of us and make sure the work continued. And somewhere along the line, they got lazy and greedy.
Interesting. And we're going to talk about that when we come back for a break. We're going to be taking a short break here. But I'm glad you gave us kind of like a great synopsis, actually leading now into the space program and what's currently going on. So if you don't mind, we'll discuss that after the break. Stay tuned. Stay on the line with us, dear listeners, and we'll be right back with more. Thank you so much.
And now, your emissary to planet Earth, the host of our reality, Violeta Brankovic.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to our reality. Today we have a very special guest. I call her the living library of the universe at this point. And this is an extreme privilege you're witnessing today, I promise you. My truth detector is like going, yes, yes, yes. This is what you want to listen to and research, because this is the truth what this woman is telling us. Now, before the break, we went into 1600s where she said the space programs were started there. The Mars, I will call them herd population, doesn't know about us. We as a herd, again, don't know about people on Mars. But what we talked about is the Germans are there on Mars, and we're going to talk about with Penny right now. How did the secret space program start? What is the American involvement and the German involvement? I guess, are they together, or what about the secret space program? What is it, Penny?
Okay, the Germans went into space first, and they went through Antarctica rather than Germany. And their machines, the Hanabu ships, were very radioactive. And so the Mantid Empire, who are not the same as the Mantids on Mars, felt sorry for them and gave them regeneration technology. And that matters a lot because they shared that with the CIA. So that's information people need. When Admiral Byrd came down in 1946 or 47, and he was doing Operation High Jump, he attacked the Antarctic base known as Neuschwabenland, and they defended themselves and won. So at that point, the folks in Antarctica had won World War II. Most people on Earth don't realize the Germans in Germany were never given a peace treaty. World War II is still ongoing legally. So, Italy, Spain, Japan were all given peace treaties. Germany was not. So Germany is still the entire country. Everything that was part of the Third Reich is a prisoner of war camp at this point. And people, I think, deserve to know that.
Yeah.
They're occupied by the Allies, and people think that when Germany was allowed to reunify in about 1990, that meant that they were free people again, and they're not. They're still an occupied nation and have to have permission to do anything. So people who are blaming the Germans for stuff, it's not their fault at this point. They have not bothered anybody since the 1940s.
And now permission from whom?
Permission from Russia, America, France, and Great Britain.
Got you. And now let's talk about America. And we have the CIAs, the FBIs, and NSAs. Now, all these organizations, do they know about the secret space program?
At some level, they do, yes. The lower level people do not. This is a secret that they hold tighter than they did the atomic bomb.
Got you. And with President Trump doing the, what is it called, Space Force now, has that kind of, is that going to be a significant, I guess, branch of the army that's going to be let in to these secrets?
There was a group that we veterans of the Black Ops were calling Earth Defense Force. I don't know if that was their real name or not. But they were given a list of 120 ET races that were allowed into Earth space, and they would shoot down everybody else. And so what the new Space Force is starting that as a public thing, publicly known thing. So it's not exactly declassifying the old one, but it's transferring those people into something that's publicly known about. So they're still under classification for what they knew before. Now, in my opinion, those people are the real heroes because they went into this as adults knowing what they were getting into, where the rest of us were all kidnapped as children.
Got you. And why were you kidnapped? You said for psychic abilities mostly?
I was kidnapped because they needed human beings to work in these black ops, and they needed these people to have certain abilities. They wanted people who were telepathic because nearly all the extraterrestrials are. So they needed someone who could talk to the ETs. And some of us have other abilities in addition. I was in the programs, I'm able to take physical objects into other dimensions with me and bring them out separately, safely. That's, even in the programs, this is a very rare ability. And the job that it goes with is called a navigator. But what you do, hyperspace is moving into another dimension with physical objects.
Okay.
Hyperspace is how we go faster than light. So, you remember hearing about the Uss Eldridge and the Philadelphia experiment?
Yes, where they tried to make a ship disappear from the radar, but instead it disappeared from reality, right?
Yes, it went into hyperspace without a navigator. And that's why the people were in the walls and the floors. The job of the navigator is to keep them separated. So you're going into another dimension and you're coming back and you're making sure the organic living beings are not inside each other or physical objects. That is my job in space. To make sure the people are not in the wall.
Got you. To navigate, to separate, and just make sure everything goes smoothly.
Yes.
Got you.
On most ships, that job is done by an extraterrestrial because very few humans, even those of us taken for the programs, very few of us have this ability. And those of us who do all have adrenal problems. So it's not something they can breed into us because we're left either unable to have kids or our children are born deformed. So this is not something they can just breed into humanity. This is something they have to modify the individual that they're going to take. So
they have to modify the person genetically?
Genetically before they're born. In my generation, they would interfere with an embryo and process.
Okay.
And I had a twin sister, and this process killed her.
Sorry to hear that.
So what they do now is they're basically doing test tube babies now to do this. So they do all the modifications first and then insert the embryo into the chosen mom, who may or may not be genetically related to them.
Yes. May I ask you this, and feel free not to answer if you don't want to. What about these vaccines? Is that something similar?
This may get you in trouble on social media.
It already did. I don't mind if it gets me in trouble, but if you are comfortable answering it.
Okay. The U.S. military has been looking for a way to end the problem of suicide bombers who are religious fanatics. And they have been looking for a quote-unquote vaccine to accomplish this. And I cannot prove it at this point, but I believe the current vaccine to be that. So if you start paying attention to people, there have already been reports of people who have had the second part saying that they can no longer feel God.
Yeah.
So that verifies my fear for it. But there is no scientific proof that this is actually what this is. But that
Actually,
is what
yeah.
I feel it is.
Actually, you're right, because when I was listening to the CIA briefing with Bill Gates, and they were actually creating back then, they were looking for a vaccine or a chemical agent to actually do that back in Afghanistan and so on. So
Yeah.
now bringing it here, and they're disconnecting people from God, which I remember, Penny, when I was sick 2-3 years ago, and they put me on cocktail of Xanax and all that. I'm off of that now, but while I was on it, no ET contact, no psychic abilities, forget about talking to God. Like I was totally disconnected. I was like a zombie. And it came
Yeah.
back once I got off, it came back within 2 years. But now this vaccine seems to be something that will do this permanently.
Yeah, that's the feeling that I have about it, is that it's doing it as a permanent thing. My doctor used to have me on Prozac because, as part of the adrenal issue, I had episodes of depression.
Yeah.
And the Prozac didn't actually help. It just made me numb, and I couldn't feel God then either.
Mm-hmm.
And I went off it in 2012. Mm-hmm. And by 2016, I was, back to my ability to interact with ETs and anyone else.
Good, thank God.
So, well,
good.
Some days I wonder if it's a good thing or not.
I know the feeling.
Not everything out there is friendly.
I know. That's it. You know what? It's unique though. This experiences you're having are so unique, and it's beautiful to listen to you and get those conclusions. But I was going to ask you, and I asked you during the break, just for information purposes, what do you think of reincarnation?
I think reincarnation is the normal way that the universe operates. Mm-hmm. We have conservation of mass. We have conservation of energy. There's no reason to not have conservation of consciousness as well. Mm-hmm. And that's what reincarnation represents, is conservation of consciousness. There's also reason to believe that the entirety of reality is conscious at some level. Mm-hmm. Because there's nothing that, there's nothing that they found that says this is conscious or this isn't. And the way that quantum mechanics operates, that the observer influences the outcome, that implies that there's consciousness from both interacting. So
makes sense. And we are really manifestors, all of humanity. We manifest things, and we're being controlled currently, and even more now with these vaccines that are coming. But it's all very, very interesting to think about. Now, who would you say currently would be the top of who's in charge on Earth? Would it be the Draco, in your opinion?
My understanding from everything that I have found, talking with people or doing research, is that the Anunnaki are still in charge.
Okay.
That the galactic government considers the Anunnaki in charge of this planet, and they are who most agree created Homo sapien out of Homo erectus, and they are who interbred with Homo sapien to create the elite level. So they are in charge. Now, if you talk to the elites at a certain level, they will call these people Draco.
Okay.
But their physical descriptions are Anunnaki.
With the wings, right?
Well, the wings were added by the Assyrians, but the original drawings of them don't have the wings.
Okay.
So they look like humans, except they albino humans, and their eye color is usually bunny red, like an albino, but some of them have gold eyes, and some have blue, and some have green.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember from the ancient myths, the children of Apollo all had gold eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was because Apollo was an Anunnaki.
Okay. Yeah,
So,
I was covering Greek mythology a while ago. Interesting. Now, what do you say now with all this, all these factions, that are called Liberation Earth, like the Palladians, the Lyra, Andromedans, higher consciousness? Have you had contact with them?
I have not had contact with most of those. I have had contact with, they call themselves the Galactic Authority to me.
Mm-hmm.
And they say they are the government of the core of the galaxy. Mm-hmm. And the Guardians are their military police, but they're an independent agency. I have contact with the Guardians.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they're a group of many races. They take the cream of the crop from the planet. The people, and I use the term people loosely, it's a consciousness in a physical form. Mm-hmm. And that physical form may not even look alive to you. Mm-hmm. But they take those who are not just physically fit and intelligent, but also have impeccable ethics. Mm-hmm. These are the people that they use in the Guardians. Mm-hmm. And they're not, because they have impeccable ethics, you can't bribe them.
Yes, you can't offer them millions of dollars or diamonds.
Yeah. So they come through and they enforce galactic law and justice as they see it. And I've had folks ask me, well, why don't the Guardians come in and fix this world? Well, the trouble is we have agreed to this. Mm-hmm. Okay? If you are presented with an idea and you don't say no, you have agreed to it. That's the exact opposite of what all our religions teach us. But this is what galactic law is. So as long as you are agreeing to things under galactic law, the Guardians cannot come in and intervene because you've agreed to it. So if you want things to change, you have to start saying no out loud.
Gotcha.
The universe does hear no quite well. And there are ears listening to hear it finally being said here.
Got you. So for anybody who's maybe being abducted, who's experiencing things, or in general in life, voice your opinion. Say, no, I do not want this. I do not agree with this. I do not want to be a part of it. Or
I do not consent to this.
Okay, perfect. I can confirm that that's true. You're right. You have to voice it. You have to stop your consent in order for something to stop. That's absolutely true. Absolutely correct.
So you have to stop consenting to it. That's step number one. And the reason that I'm public about what's gone on in my life is I'm wanting to stop the kidnapping of more children because this is ongoing. I was contacted last month by a family with a 4-year-old, a little boy who is refusing to go to sleep because he doesn't want to go back to space again.
Yep, I believe that.
So this is ongoing and needs to be stopped.
Yep. I believe that that's when my experiences that I remember of also started around 3 or 4 years old, and they never stopped until I stopped consenting to some things, like later in adulthood, right? But when I was aware that I could stop it, but you were saying during the break that in order to escape reincarnation, we have to be, I believe you said, more than 51% in service to others, or
yes. There is a cage around Earth that you can't leave unless you are 52% service to others. And our culture is so service to self that it's really hard to get to that point.
Got you.
But if you are at that point when you die, you get to leave.
That's beautiful. And maybe be in a spiritual universe where things are much better and not so havocy and conflicted.
Your producer is telling us that the show is almost over. So thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. We have 1 minute left. I will thank you too, Penny. It's been extraordinary. I really regret it's only 1 hour long, but I hope it has enlightened or helped our listeners maybe dig deeper and understand how much more there is to it. I've certainly learned a little bit here too, and maybe we'll have you on the show next time again, and we'll delve deeper into some of the topics that we just started.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Penny. Everybody have a beautiful week or weekend, and we'll talk to you next week. Until then, many greetings from our reality. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Our Reality, hosted by Violeta Frankovic. Live every Saturday from the heart of Las Vegas, Nevada, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on the host as well as the show, as well as upcoming guests, please check out our reality show page at kcorradio.com.
Our reality.
From the ordinary to the extraordinary, we've got you covered. Our Reality, changing the world, one topic at a time. This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.